Okay, and live, let's go live now.
Good afternoon, good morning to all our participants.
Joan?
Thank you. Good afternoon, dear participants, and welcome to this regional dialogue. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, all right, thank you. So good afternoon and welcome. I wish to start by first welcoming you to this regional dialogue for Southern Africa, in which we're privileged to have the honor and the honor and the privilege of hosting you all in this conversation on violence, on the prevention and ending violence against children. So we as the African Partnership to End Violence Against Children, together with ACPF, are honored that you have responded to our invitation to be with us this afternoon. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our dialogue forum towards an Africa free from violence against children. May I start by acknowledging the presence of the Assistant Minister for Local Government and Rural Development from the Republic of Botswana, Honorable Mabuse Mopati-Pule, the presence of Ms. Bridget Moya, the Director for Child Development from the Ministry of Youth, Sports and Child Development from the Republic of Zambia, Mr. McKnight Kalanda, the Director of Child Affairs from the Ministry of Gender, Community Development and Social Welfare of the Republic of Malawi, and Ms. Angelica Magaya, the National Director, Children's Department of the Ministry of Gender and Social Action, Republic of Mozambique. And most importantly, the presence of our child speaker here today, Ms. Emelinda Mbambo from the Republic of Namibia. Thank you all for joining us. Ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure to be with you this afternoon and to be part of this unified effort towards our shared aspiration of a continent where no child suffers from violence, and in particular, a subcontinent where no child feels threatened or unsafe. In Africa, the prevalence of violence against children is still alarming. We see FGM, female genital mutilation, child marriage, child labor, trafficking, sexual violence, corporal punishment, and even child labor, and other worse forms of violence, such as honor killings, breast ironing, that continue to threaten the well-being of our children. In many countries, we are pleased that national laws have been passed to prohibit violence against children, though in others, the laws do not explicitly prohibit all forms of violence. Our concern as the African Partnership to End Violence Against Children is that despite the considerable advances in the areas of law and policy reform that we are seeing across Africa, implementation and enforcement face serious setbacks for effective protection of all children from all forms of violence in all settings and in all countries. The success in enforcing these laws is therefore the question. The other question that we as Africans must consider is those factors that hold us back, those factors from our culture, our values, and our norms. We must look at the economic and gender inequalities, the armed conflicts, their displacements that continue to expose children to violence and to increase their vulnerability. And in particular, girls, children with disabilities, children living in rural areas, and even children living in displacement. Allow me to remind you that yesterday was the International Day of Girls. So as we have this conversation, we must remember those children who are marginalized and discriminated against. And we cannot ignore what COVID-19 has done. It has threatened the modest progress we had made as a continent, and we face the risk of all our gains being reversed. But you in your countries on the ground know this even better than I am, because you are living and working directly with children in the spaces where they live, where they learn, and where they grow, and where they must remain safe, where they must feel secure to live, learn, and play. And so as we gather today as the countries of Southern Africa, although we gather online without the benefit of seeing each other's faces, we are here to explore where we as a sub-region have made good progress, and also to see what remains to be done in order to achieve a sub-region that is free from violence against children and contribute to the wider aspiration of the same for Africa. We recognize, as the African Child Policy Forum and the African Partnership to End Violence Against Children, that Africa is not homogeneous. And therefore, we have chosen to have sub-regional dialogues, starting with this one in South Africa. Others will follow in other sub-regions of the continent. Honorable guests, ladies and gentlemen, dear participants, I will remind you that last year in 2020, it was an important year for African children because we marked the 30th anniversary of the adoption of the African Charter on the Rights and Welfare of the Child. In these 30 years, there is no question we have made progress. There is also an encouraging development in the sub-region where governments are taking important steps of developing comprehensive, concrete national plans of action to protect children, but more specifically to combat violence against children. This is commendable. However, there is a limitation because in almost all cases, these policy frameworks are not backed by sufficient resources, and they are not backed by concrete multi-sectoral strategies that should be coordinated. Countries in the region need to invest into an integrated multi-sectoral plan of action that is aligned with the national development agenda if we are going to succeed in preventing and responding to violence against children. And so today we have an opportunity to renew our efforts. And I want us to renew our efforts in 3 ways. And I invite you to do this with me. The first is to see how can we strengthen implementation and enforcement of laws and policies that prohibit violence against children in all settings. The question of strengthening implementation. The second one is the question of learning from each other. How do we share our experiences in adopting, resourcing, and implementing action plans that prevent violence against children? And the third question is to then to find ways where we can be more coordinated in our efforts as neighboring countries across borders, but also within our borders as ministries, sectors, and diverse players at national level. Everyone has a role to play. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm sure that is not disputed. And therefore, we are here together as governments, as CSOs, as development partners, and as UN agencies to see how together we can advance progress in the Southern Africa region. There are many important things to think about as we look at making progress towards an Africa free from violence against children. I will only mention 2 for the purpose of this discussion today. One is promoting the fundamental principle of child participation by listening to children themselves and meaningfully considering what it is that they tell us. We have seen and we celebrate many initiatives in the Southern Africa region of creating spaces for children to actively participate in identifying solutions to their problems. I commend this. It is now important for us to listen keenly and actively and consider their views, because children are part of the solution for ending violence against them. They can help us to come up with, we must therefore provide opportunities for them to speak up, to build their capacity, and to empower them to play active roles in shaping the policies and the programs to advance their own protection. The second thing, and this is brought out by evidence in our reports, is that there is a rich, unique African culture and heritage that gives us a lot of solutions in preventing and responding to violence against children. And we documented this in our report launched in July called Here to Stay, Homegrown Practices. I urge you all to give sufficient attention, both time and resources, to these local knowledge and practices to see how we can use our homegrown solutions to end our own problems of violence against children. And so, ladies and gentlemen, with these few remarks, I welcome you to this dialogue forum, and I wish you fruitful deliberations. Before I close, I wish to now invite our child speaker, Ms. Emelinda Mbambo from the Republic of Namibia, who will share her perspectives with us. And this is in the spirit of making sure that we include children in conversations that affect them. Over to you, Ms. Belinda Mbambo. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Good afternoon from Namibia. Good afternoon from Namibia. Greetings to the chairperson, Mr. Patrick Onyango, Chief Executive Officer, REPSI, Dr. Joanne Nyanyuki, Executive Director, ACPF Chair, Executive Council, African Partnership, and Violence Against Children, APVEC, Ms. Beans, Philomena Governors, former Undersecretary General, Special Advisor on Africa to the United Nations Secretary General Member, APVEC Advisory Group. Professor Shanez Matthews, Director, Children's Institute, University of Cape Town, South Africa Member, APVEC Advisory Group. All country protocols observed, including distinguished online guests. Ladies and gentlemen, every child deserves to have a happy childhood, and that is all we as children desire. There is an African proverb that says, it takes a village to raise a child. But unfortunately today, most of whom are responsible for making life easier in the village are part of those who are violent towards children. Moreover, children normalize what they see when they grow up. So the more violence they see, the more they normalize such occurrence in society and become violent mothers, they become violent fathers and violent leaders. It is because of such violence that you find leaders that are supposed to create and keep peace in our African countries easily resort to wars, cook the terrors, and rebel movements. That is absolutely unsafe for a child, as we never know what to expect and we become afraid of our own future. Mothers help us to grow into better girls and boys by not using violence to discipline us, while we want to understand when it is true discipline. Fathers take care of us and our mothers to avoid us becoming victim of circumstances. Namibia states that in order to create a world where every child, adolescent, and young person is safe, protected, and thriving, we must first know the facts in Namibia. Both girls and boys experience high rates of sexual and physical violence. 12% of girls and 7% of boys experience sexual violence as compared to physical violence, where 33% of girls and 41% of boys experience physical violence. That means we get beaten up and manhandles all the time. I always wonder, are we that mischievous as children? At the same time, 50% of girls who don't tell anyone about their experience of violence, and only 10% receive services. I am blessed to be raised by my father, a single man. He could have chosen to live his life without me. It gives me hope that a man is created to wisely lead a household. It helps me to ask questions and to make conclusions as a teenager. However, the question is, how involved were children in all the strategies that represent us? My appeal is that governments involve us children in policy making and decision around children. In this way, we have a better understanding and a good foundation for inclusive leadership in future. Some regulations are even foreign to understanding of our parents reasons they fail to explain to us. Law enforcement. If law enforcement has been exercised over the years, which is the case at the moment, and violence against children has continued, we need to rethink the type interventions that which change the mindset of the perpetrator, because violence can be learned behavior. Support the livelihood of parents to ensure food, clothing, and shelter for us. That will minimize frustration and child becoming victims and promote a happier environment. Create safe environment for children. I need to feel safe at home, safe at school, and safe within the community. We need funding to establish and organize strong support groups that can protect girls and boys in the community. Family strengthen programs whereby responsible parenting and leadership in fatherhood are emphasized. Start with boys before they are even teenagers and start dating girls. Teachings on how to relate to the opposite sex should be done in a more informal setting than life school rooms. The government ministries who receive this fund should make sure that it reaches the grassroots level. The education system should ensure programs that directly prevent and address bullying in schools. As a girl, we want to be safe around our teachers and our senior learners. Incorporate the issue of VAC and strategies in the basic education of teachers and other responsible officials. As we are given a voice to speak on behalf of children, please do not label us or follow up on us for striving to live and speak the truth. That could be our only angle of power to prevent violence against children. Include our voices and share the results with us. Our self-worth matters. In conclusion, it is true that ending violence against children is one of the most important priorities of our time, but it will not happen without strong political leadership. Please help us, children of Africa. We do not be child soldiers or sexual slaves. We do not want to be married off at a young age. We do not just want to survive, we want to live. We have great dreams, we want to study, have careers, families, and build our nations. Equally important to note that organizations like APVAC, ACPF, REPSI, amongst others, are lifeline to us because VAC has never been addressed like this before. Thank you for such kind of dialogue and this opportunity to speak on behalf of all children. My sincere gratitude to REPSI. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Melinda. I will now invite Dr. Shimelit Segaya, the ACPF Director of Programs, to take us through to the next session of our program. Welcome, Shimelis.
Thank you. Joanne, can you hear me?
Yes, Shimelis, go ahead.
Excellent, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I would like to thank Ms. Melinda and Joanne for their inspiring words. My name is Shimelis. I am the Director of Programs here at the African Child Policy Forum. Again, welcoming you all to this dialogue forum on combating violence against children in the Southern Africa region. I will start by briefly introducing our agenda. We'll basically be having 3 sessions starting from now. The first session will be having esteemed government panelists who will share their country's experiences in terms of combating violence against children and also their capacity constraints. We have speakers from the Republic of Botswana, the Republic of Zambia, the Republic of Malawi, and the Republic of Mozambique. We'll also be having another session where we'll be hearing the civil society perspective. We all know that any meaningful effort to combat violence against children basically has to join hands with civil society. It's not something that's left to governments alone. So we'll hear the civil society perspective later on. And we'll also be having a closing session, but in between, I will invite the participants to participate in questions and answers. So that is our agenda briefly. But before I go into introducing the first panelists of the first session, I will invite you to watch a video documentary on violence against children in Africa. It's a continental Africa-wide documentary that tries to capture and document the state of violence against children in the continent, what has been done so far, and some of the challenges that still persist. Now let's move on to watching the video now.
John?
Is the infographic video ready, Jennifer?
Of us who strive to improve the lives and prospects of the people of this continent. However, significant challenges remain at both national and community level to prevent and protect children from violence. By taking stock of progress, challenges and solutions, we can map a path that may lead us to the realization of this vision. There are clear indicators of progress which prove that concerted efforts produce positive results. Firstly, African states have made significant progress in ratifying global and continental key legal instruments. The widely ratified Convention on the Rights of the Child and its optional protocols, and the African Charter on the Rights and Welfare of the Child serve as the cornerstones. The adoption of Agenda 2063, Agenda 2040, and the Sustainable Development Goals further augment the efforts within these binding legal instruments to address violence against children. Secondly, there has been significant progress on the legal protection of children from violence. 49 out of 55 countries now have consolidated children's acts, providing a wide range of protections for children. Most African governments have set the minimum age of marriage at 18 years or above. With the exception of 3 countries, all African states recognize freedom from torture and inhuman punishment as a fundamental right in their constitutions. 29 countries have set the minimum employment age higher than 14 years. To date, 42 countries have laws that prohibit harmful practices. For example, female genital mutilation is criminalized in at least 28 African countries. Many African countries have passed anti-trafficking laws. Enhanced access to justice for victims of violence against children is visible through the application of these legally binding instruments. Thirdly, African governments have put national strategies and programs in place to combat violence against children. Many countries in Africa now have a comprehensive national action plan, and there are encouraging examples of countries implementing multi-sectoral and stakeholder coordinated action to address the protection of children from violence. Comprehensive child protection systems are now in place in some countries. Even though countries in Africa spend on average less than 0.7% of GDP on social protection, it remains a key tool in enabling families to better care for their children. Positive parenting programs implemented via the healthcare systems are improving relationships between parents and their children, with the clear potential to reduce violence. Africa is home to several homegrown solutions that have been effective in addressing violence against children. These initiatives address the complex interplay of factors between the child and his or her social context, such as the family, school, community, and society that influence the child's exposure to violence. A number of key factors contribute to this success. Political will at the highest level is essential to create a culture of prevention of violence, including strong legal and policy frameworks, systems, and adequate budgeting. Community ownership has created opportunities for local initiatives to take root, scale up, and mobilize rapidly. Community-based mechanisms facilitate access to the most marginalized and hard-to-reach groups, especially in areas that have experienced protracted conflicts. Interventions that take holistic, intersectional approaches are very effective at a family level. Resilience and leadership at an individual level, with a strong resolve to building girls' and boys' agency, is a critical factor. Faith-based bodies can be instrumental due to a strong influence on the community and a history of addressing moral and ethical issues. Existing community assets, such as village savings and loan associations, can be harnessed for economic strengthening and hence violence prevention at family levels. All of these factors show that when strong commitment and sustained action come together, violence in children's lives stops being perceived as inevitable and indeed can be eliminated. Although African governments have taken important steps in strengthening their normative frameworks, the persistently fragile state of children's rights, marked by ever-increasing and changing forms of violence, is a huge concern. There is still insufficient investment in violence prevention despite the high cost of inaction. Legislation is poorly enforced. Policy and system interventions remain uncoordinated. Particularly vulnerable children remain hidden and overlooked due to their circumstances, which may include conflict, displacement, poverty, age, gender, or disability. Free birth registration coverage is extremely low in many African countries. There is inadequate attention to the cumulative impact of violence across children's lives. There is not enough investment in regularly generating comprehensive data. And there are deep-rooted social norms and practices that still condone violence against children. As a result, while there are many children in Africa who live in joy and peace, a staggering number of children are still exposed to violence in all its forms. At least 60% of boys and 51% of girls have experienced physical abuse. In many parts of Africa, 8 in 10 children experienced violent discipline in the home. About half of children aged 13 to 15 have been bullied in schools. The continent has the highest median rates of child neglect in the world, with almost 42% of girls and 39% of boys being neglected by their caregivers. In some countries, 30 to 40% of adolescent girls are victims of sexual violence before the age of 15, and sub-Saharan Africa has the highest incidence of child trafficking in the world. Female genital mutilation is still almost universal in some countries, including Somalia, Guinea, and Djibouti, even though other countries have had success in bringing this rate down. Some children experience violence in a more sustained and damaging way than others because of their circumstances. Sexual violence inflicted on children with disabilities is high in many countries. Children with albinism are sometimes subjected to crimes and extreme forms of violence. Children living and/or working on the street are subjected to increased physical and sexual abuse. Increasingly, travel and tourism have become a key frontier for sexual exploitation of children. Terror attacks on civilians, including children, have become a grave child rights challenge. And online, children now face risks of sexual abuse through technological platforms. The COVID-19 pandemic has brought additional challenges in preventing and responding to violence against children. With more than 120 million schoolgirls at home in Africa due to COVID lockdowns, exacerbating their vulnerability, there has been a spike in reports of child abuse, domestic violence, and sexual offences. With so much of our present and future at stake, ending violence against children has become one of the most important priorities of our time. Reaching the goal of a continent free from violence against children will thus require stakeholders to act collectively and decisively. AU and sub-regional bodies must demonstrate political leadership, fight impunity through administrative and judicial processes, and act in solidarity by accelerating the implementation of the relevant goals of Agendas 2063, 2040, and 2030. National governments need to ensure that treaties are fully ratified without reservations, and to harmonize domestic laws accordingly. Laws that criminalize all forms of violence against children must be enacted to enhance protection of children from violence. Adequate budgeting should be in place to fund a comprehensive national plan of action that is anchored within a robust child protection system that prioritizes prevention. Evidence and data on the magnitude of the phenomena, system gaps, and solutions must inform action. Civil society organizations need to engage in multifaceted advocacy and engage with governments, Pan-African and sub-regional bodies to influence policy. At a community level, They should support families to be at the forefront of violence against children prevention and response, and scale up homegrown good practices. UN agencies and international organizations should continue to provide assistance, both technical and financial, to governments and CSOs. They can also complement data collection efforts through enhancing national surveillance. The vision of creating an Africa free from violence against children starts with each of us as individuals, examining our attitudes and behaviors to ensure that we never perpetuate these issues. We invite you to take a pledge, to make a personal, lifetime commitment to help end all forms of violence against children. Let us speak out against violence against children wherever and whenever it occurs, be it in our families, at work, or in our communities. It is only through nurturing a culture of rights and dialogue that we will be able to achieve a society that is humane and free from violence, where children are raised in an environment of peace and security.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the documentary. The documentary has really given us the Pan-African overview of the state of violence against children in Africa, the challenges that we are faced with, and some of the progress made in some countries in the continent in terms of combating violence against children. Now we will zoom in on the Southern African region, and we'll hear experiences from 4 countries of the region. Some of these countries have really made commendable progress in terms of combating violence against children. We have a speaker from the Republic of Botswana, the Honorable Mabuse Mopati-Pole, who is Assistant Minister at the Ministry of Local Government and Rural Development. We have Ms. Bridget Moya, who is the Director for Child Development at the Ministry of Youth, Sport and Child Development at the Republic of Republic of Zambia. We have Mr. McKnight Kalanda, who is the Director of Child Affairs at the Ministry of Gender, Community Development and Social Welfare from the Republic of Malawi. And we have Ms. Angelica Mageya, who is the National Director for the Children's Department at the Ministry of Gender and Social Action, the Republic of Mozambique. So each of these speakers, esteemed speakers, will share with us their country's experiences in terms of combating violence against children. Like I said earlier, each of these countries did make progress, commended progress in addressing violence against children in the continent. I now have the honor and pleasure to invite the Honorable Mabuse Mopati-Pole, the Assistant Minister, Local Government and Rural Development Ministry, the Republic of Botswana. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you very much, Director of Ceremonies. Director of Ceremonies, if you allow me, for the sake of time, to just say, I respect the presence of all the dignitaries here in this meeting. So I'll just say all protocol, observed. Director of Ceremonies, Botswana has a very small population, just beyond 2 million. And out of this, we have 35% as children. That is persons below the age of 18. So this shows that children occupy a large space in our population, and they should be therefore considered as part of our agenda in Botswana. So they should be fully involved in the development agenda. I don't know what's wrong with my video. It's very dark. I don't know what's going on. I'm supposed to be in a bright space, but it's dark. Can I just say in 2018, Botswana concluded its violence against children survey, which was subsequently launched on the 10th of December 2019. The study was titled National Household Survey on life experiences and risk of HIV infection amongst 13 to 24 years old males and females in Botswana. The survey was commissioned to explore the magnitude and the nature of violence against children, as well as consider potential risks and protective factors to guide specific programs, actions towards the prevention of violence against children, as well as assess the utilization of services following exposure to violence. It also presented an opportunity to the country to identify existing gaps, as well as give us an insight into gender dynamics and around violence and how it affects boys and girls differently in order to facilitate a multi-level and multi-sectoral interventions. Because obviously, the way it affects both sexes is different. Dr. Ceremonies, the study actually revealed that violence takes many forms and occurs in familiar places where children are expected to be safe, like at home, care institutions, facilities, schools, church, sports, camps, and many others, where children expect a lot of safety. That is where violence took place. Sometimes, done by relatives very close to children. There is also growing concern on child-to-child kind of violence, which is so worrisome. General bullying in schools. Very sadly, recently in Hanzi, I was in one of the provinces in Botswana, where one child was actually representing children there. And she said she was at one point, bullied, but she managed to get over it. Can you imagine those children who cannot get over it? They leave schools, they don't live a happy life, but abused by other children. So this is worrying us, and exposure of children to violence material is another challenging thing. There are also situations of where the children are bullied through cyber connectivity, what you call cyberbullying, and this is majorly done by the fact that many children now have access to Facebook, internet, electronic, devices and stuff, and they use this to, bully others. In order to facilitate coordinated action, which was earlier said in the video, towards violence prevention, the study was aligned directly with Government of Botswana key policy documents related to the well-being of children, such as Children's Act. We have a principal act in the country called Children's Act, which was actually reviewed in 2009. And the whole review was actually premised by the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child and the African Charter on the Rights of Children, welfare and rights and welfare of children. Because we worked as a country together to fully domesticate the conventions, both conventions, so that we can actually have the whole conglomerate of children's rights put under one document and ensure that they are actually adhered to. Furthermore, Botswana also has what you call a Vision 2036, which is a blueprint that guides, all activities in the country, including promotion of the Agenda 2030 for sustainable development. As you know, all of us really are very much aware of that. As a state party to the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child and African Charter on the Rights and Welfare of Children, Botswana continues to implement these treaties through Children's Act of 2009, which is the principal instrument for child protection, as I mentioned earlier. I'm happy to announce from Botswana that very soon we would like to withdraw the reservations that we had made at Article 1 and Article 2 of both conventions. And further to this, as a country, we are in the process of acceding to the Hague Convention on the inter-country child protection in a bid to further protect our children who might have been adopted outside Botswana borders in the advent of other ills such as human trafficking. Government continues to make efforts to respond to violence against children and create an environment where perpetrators are taken to task. Recently, the country has gone in a very, very comprehensive law reform and actually bringing some new acts like Sex Offenders Act, where the sex offenders are actually given very, very stringent punishment if they do engage with children. We have also witnessed a number of statutes in Botswana being reviewed, like the Penal Code, Chapter 801, Anti-Human Trafficking, Adoption of Children, Criminal Procedure and Evidence Act. And these are acts with sections that protect children, and they were reviewed to be aligned with the Children's Act of 2009. Furthermore, the state party has ensured that whatever the rule of customary law that could possibly undermine the rights of children, such rule has no force in law because there is a high court as the upper guardian of all minors and has the power to strike down such a rule. The Children's Act has created a comprehensive bill of rights of children. In the event we have a conflict, there is a conflict between the Children's Act and other statutes, Children's Act takes precedence. In an effort to increase the rate of reporting of cases of violence against children, a child-friendly police station has been established in the capital city. Of course, this has now witnessed, this was done in December 2020, and it has witnessed the reporting of cases increasing. So far, we have received about 111 cases that has been reported. I want to rush through this because I don't want to take your time. We have actually, put down or established some memorandum of understanding with different civil society organizations. And of course, we also provide funding to such civil society organizations, like we have what you call SOS Botswana, which is an institution that provide custody for children. It also provides other psychosocial support programs for the children. And there are several of them that receive funding from government. I should not ignore the Director of Ceremonies that the fact that we have actually been hard hit by COVID-19. During lockdowns, we have witnessed cases increasing. Actually, in April and March 2020, during our first lockdown, we had more than 80 cases, more than 80 offenses that have been committed on children between the ages of 0 and 18 years. And they were reported, most of which were sexual offenses, with defilement leading at 46 out of 80, followed by rape, which was 27 out of 80 respectively. During the same period, gender-based violence cases escalated, necessitating admission of 67 persons at gender-based violence prevention and support centers, shelters. Majority of these were women, 65, inclusive of 37 children accompanying them. Obviously, where you will find women, mostly find, they have to come with children. Director of Ceremonies, I want to also, buttress the fact that the government of Botswana has actually, done a lot in terms of, dealing with the issues related to violence against children. But of course, we have lots of challenges. We have challenges that we face in the country, like you have rightly put it earlier. Our biggest challenge is money, funding of programs. We could be having beautiful programs, beautiful laws, but the fact that we probably don't have enough money to push some of the programs that we have, we find this very much challenging. But as a matter of fact, I want to end my presentation by saying the country has done a lot. That is not enough, and I cannot claim that it is enough. And we want to see ourselves moving forward. And of course, we want to partner with you, partner with UNICEF, partner with international organizations, and continue to do better for our children. I submit Director of Ceremonies.
Thank you very much, Honorable. Thank you so much for those lessons. We really learned a lot from you and from your country in terms of what you're doing to combat violence against children. We, all the way from, law and policy reform to the availability of preventative and response services. We also learned that Botswana just withdrew its reservation on Article 1 of the Charter on the definition of the child. That was a very important provision because it has far-fetched implications on the other provision of the Charter. So I think it's great news to hear that, Honorable, and also shared with us the fact that you are now moving into more and more into multi-sectoral coordination, involving different sectors and different actors in combating violence against children. Thank you so much. You also, in the end, you also reiterated your country's commitment to do better in addressing violence against children. Thank you so much, Excellency. And now move on to the next panelist. We have Ms. Bridget Moya, who is the Director of Child Development at the Ministry of Youth, Sports and Child Development, the Republic of Zambia. Ms. Moya, Ms. Bridget, sorry, the floor is yours. Can you hear us, Ms. Bridget? Can you hear us? Ms. Bridget, are you there?
Yes, I am here.
Okay, the floor is yours, ma'am. Sure.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Bridget Moya. I am the Director for Child Development. And I would like to give everyone on the platform warm greetings from Zambia, and also to inform the participants that Zambia has a new government, the new Dawn government. We recently went through the tripartite elections on the 12th of August, and we send you warm greetings from the new government. May I now proceed to make my presentation and also ride on the area protocols that have been given. I'm making a presentation on Zambia's progress towards multi-sector action to end violence against children. Many of us are aware that Zambia conducted the first violence against children survey in 2014, and the findings were published in 2018. The findings did point to the fact that violence against children was quite prevalent in Zambia, and it was occurring in homes, in schools, and in communities in general. So following the findings, government decided and made it a public policy under the 7th National Development Plan, which is anchored on multi-sector coordination and clustering of function. So there was a strong decision made to strengthen multi-sector coordination through the National Coordination Committee for Children. I wish to emphasize that multi-sector coordination and multi-sector approaches is one of the key themes under the current National Development Plan, which unfortunately is winding up in 2021. But even as discussions have opened on the 8th National Development Plan, it is also still going to be anchored on multi-sector approaches. And in the multi-sector approaches, functions have been clustered in groups. For example, the issues of poverty and vulnerability reduction is anchored in cluster 2, and also enhancing human development is clustered in cluster 4. I'm just making an emphasis on how much government has attached multi-sector coordination at every level of our function. So we have, as a ministry and a department, the National Coordination Committee, which is structured on 4 pillars. And the 4 pillars are derived from the National Child Policy of 2015. And the pillars are child protection, under which we have streamlined the issues of violence against children, and also child participation, child development, and child survival. These are technical working groups that seek to ensure that all rights of the children under these 4 pillars, according to the policy, are addressed and are well attended to. I wish to go on and say that in 2020, Zambia trained 40 trainers in the Inspire strategies, and these were members that were drawn from the National Coordination Committee. You may wish to know that the National Coordination Committee, the NCC, is made up of state and non-state actors who are part of the program, part of the implementation of the programs under the child sector. And in 2020, again, Zambia, through its coordination committee, completed the development of the National Prevention and Response Plan on Ending Violence Against Children. This came as an outcome of the findings, which showed that for Zambia to address the prevalence of violence against children, we needed to have a prevention and a response plan that will address the issues around violence against children. So I wish to inform everyone here that the plan is scheduled to be launched this October, and it will be rolled out into all the 10 provinces of Zambia. We are doing this because we kind of are behind schedule, and we thought we could do simultaneous launches across all the provinces. And the launch will also mark out the national campaign to end violence against children. So we are hoping that as we make people aware of the prevention and the response plan towards violence against children, we will also, as a nation, carry out a national campaign to ensure that we bring awareness to the statistics that were part of the findings in the survey, but also to the global reports that also did indicate some of the interventions that as a country we are undertaking and how much we are far-reaching in these interventions. Next slide, please. In October 2020, you may wish to know that Zambia, through the office of the then Vice President, remember I said we have changed government, the then Vice President did make a national commitment that as Zambia, we are going to pull all resources available to end violence against children. And following this national public commitment, Zambia was accepted into the Global Partnership for Ending Violence Against Children as the 8th African country to join the partnership. What is guiding the policy measures and policy strategies on violence against children is the 2015 National Child Policy. I will just highlight some of the key strategic objectives, which are to ensure child protection rights in order to safeguard and uphold child rights and well-being, and also to coordinate and manage the formulation and implementation of multi-sector child welfare and child development programs. And the ministry responsible for child development provides policy oversight as well as leadership in coordinating multi-sector action in responding to violence against children. The next slide, please. So what have we done as a country in integrating approaches of Inspire? As I indicated in the opening remarks, Zambia is rolling out a prevention and response plan, and also conducting a campaign to raise awareness on violence against children. And through the National Coordination Committee, under the Child Protection Technical Working Group, Zambia will, on 19th November, be hosting a national dialogue to examine and discuss the 2020 global report. And also the aim of all this is to help us as government inform the development of an action plan on ending violence against children. Next slide, please. And as part of our evidence-based violence against children prevention strategies, I wish to say that Zambia has, under the police service, a police child protection unit. This one is very important to us in the sense that the police, where children are expected to report or where cases of children violence are reported to, these are more or less like civilian policemen, but trained in how to handle children and in also how to address children issues so that the children will have the confidence to report any violence that has been effected upon them. Also, as Zambia, we have a child helpline, which is helping us in responding and providing support services to children who have suffered violence. It provides a platform for reporting and responding to child protection issues through a toll-free line, 116. And they also run a short social media platform for interaction for children. We also have, as evidence-based prevention strategies, we have programs for alternative skills training under education, community, as well as under child development. You may wish to know that the alternative training that we are talking about here is for children, those that are vulnerable, and also those that are in street conditions, and also for those that have been caught up under the child justice system. So we are providing alternative training for them under the diversion framework. And we also are running schools where these children go for their reformation. We have two reformatory schools in Southern Province and one on the Copper Belt. Next slide, please. We also, as a part of evidence-based for violence against children prevention strategies, we run one-stop center models, which is an interprofessional health system. And these are usually based at the health centers, and it provides the survivors health services, which is combined with other social services, legal, police, including shelter services for survivors of violence against children. Here, we are saying we bring all these interventions in one central place so that we reduce more trauma for the child if they have to move from one office to the other to make a report on the violence that they have suffered. So as they make a report, they are also able to receive quality health services, and it also offers them shelter for those that are at a risk of further violence. And it also, this all is done in a child-friendly and gender-sensitive manner, so that we, in one place, we will address the issues of safety, the issues of health, and also the social needs. And we also, at the same time, ensure that this child receives or has access to justice. Within the protection measures that we also have economic strengthening, where through the social cash transfer under the Ministry of Community Development and Social Services, and also public social welfare assistance, where we discover that issues of violence are being perpetuated because of socioeconomic problems. Those families or those children are able to be incorporated into these social cash transfer programs. You may also wish to know that this also has extended to child-headed homes, where a child is the head of the family. We have, as at February this year, we had enlisted a total of over 2,000 child-headed homes under the social cash transfer. We also have, many of us may be aware that under Zambia has signed the Hague Convention, signed and ratified. And we are saying, as a nation, institution of children is a measure of last resort. And we have an alternative care and support to children in need of care or children separated from the family. These, the alternative care could be any of these options of foster care, adoption, and kingship. So we are working on deinstitutionalizing childcare in Zambia, hence the motto, institutionalization is a measure of last resort. Under child justice, we have a child justice forum that coordinates social welfare and criminal justice support services for all children who need them. The next slide, please. In conclusion, Zambia is saying violence, yes, is common, and therefore there is need for an enhanced multi-sector action to effectively prevent and respond to violence against children. And this must be seen as an ongoing program. Further, Zambia seeks to integrate evidence-based prevention strategies and approaches and seeks to make this a priority for all sectors working with children and child-related programs. And as a way forward for Zambia, we have prioritized coordination because we want to harness and strengthen existing successful policy frameworks and also programs that are effective in order to reduce factors for violence against children. We also are determined to introduce new ones in spaces where the current ones are not as responsive as they are expected to be. We also seek to increase awareness on responses and services that are available for children in need of care and protection. You may wish to know that Zambia will be undertaking a mapping exercise to ensure that the responses and services that are available for children are actually not just available, but they are accessible to the children. So we really want to work around increasing awareness on these responses, because I may wish to share with you that in our last survey, we learned that one of the findings was that we had zero girls, especially, not being able to access any of the services that they needed after they had suffered violence. And in this, going forward, we are determined to ensure that we create awareness, and where responses and services are not available, we make them available to ensure that children are protected holistically. And also in going forward, we seek to develop strategies to increase knowledge and availability and accessibility of quality services across service sectors. And we are also advocating for the inclusion of violence against children as a subject in the national development agenda. We are drawing this from the experience of gender-based violence, which has a section highlighting its strategies. We do not want violence against children to be discussed as though it's only gender-based violence. We would like this particular component to stand out. And as discussions for the 8th National Development Plan were being undertaken, we have made this submission, and we are hopeful that we are going to see a paragraph or two specifying why we need violence against children to stand, and which strategies we need to employ, and which services and responses we need to employ as a country in order to address the issues of violence against children. This is the end of my presentation. I thank you all, and I submit, Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Ms. Bridget. Thank you so much. I would like to say that you have been very supportive of the work of the African Child Policy Forum and VAC in your country. Thank you so much. Frankly, it's good to say that at this junction. We just heard from Ms. Bridget about the lessons from Zambia, all the way from the 2014 VAC survey, which, by the way, surveys are a very important prerequisite for developing evidence-based strategies and national plan of action. And that's exactly what Zambia did. So that was one of the most important starting points, really, for having a series of actions on violence against children. We also learned that Zambia is now prioritizing multi-sectoral coordinating systems. Zambia has got what is called the National Coordinating Committee for Children. By the way, this is what a very good practice that other countries can learn from, really. So this is a very innovative and a very important mechanism for bringing together the different sectors, all the way from civil society to governments, in combating violence against children. Of course, we learned that we know that Zambia has already become a pathfinding country. Countries, for those of you who may not know the pathfinding initiative, for a country to really subscribe to the pathfinding initiative, to be accepted to be a pathfinding country, should demonstrate greater political commitment and also concrete action, both in the area of prevention and response. That is what Zambia did. And Zambia has now already become a pathfinding country, like Ms. Bridges just presented. Finally, Ms. Bridget also talked about the commitment of the government of Zambia to elevate violence against children to a national development agenda. That is a very, very important statement. And frankly, until all countries in Africa elevate violence against children to the level of a national development agenda, we may not really see very concrete results. And that is really important, to give political visibility to this issue, to elevate the issue to the level of a national development agenda. That is a very important commitment that the government of Zambia has made. Thank you, Ms. Moya, again. I now move on to the next speaker. We have Mr. Magnet Kalanda, who is the Director of Child Affairs at the Ministry of Gender, Community Development and Social Welfare, the Republic of Malawi. Mr. Kalanda, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. Let me also join the previous speakers by saying, welcoming all the honorable ministers present, distinguished panelists, and the distinguished guests that are witnessing this event. I will be sharing on key milestones that the country has made in addressing online child abuse and exploitation of children in Malawi. In terms of my presentation, the first aspect, we are looking at what are some of the progress highlights. The starting point is the legal and policy frameworks, starting with the Constitution itself, the Constitution of the Republic of Malawi, a dedicated Child Care Protection and Justice Act of 2010, and the other acts, including the Communications Act, Electronic Transactions and Cyber Security Act, the Penal Code, the Criminal Procedure and Evidence Code, and also two critical policies that have a huge bearing on this issue, the National ICT Policy and the National Children's Policy, that contain statements that have elements to do with child online protection. And in terms of putting into operation these legal frameworks and policies, the country has also included as part of the Malawi Growth and Development Strategy 3, issues to do with the ensuring protection of children online. Also, the National Plan of Action for Vulnerable Children is following on the same. The National Cyber Security Strategy for 2017 to 2021 is also providing some guidance and direction on what we should do as a country. And lastly, the National ICT Master Plan. Talking about the Constitution of the Republic of Malawi, specifically in section 23, it expressly prohibits exploitation of children and their exposure to conditions that are likely to be hazardous to their social, mental, educational, and spiritual well-being. And following on that, the Electronic Transactions and Cybersecurity Act of 2016 has made some specific provisions on the online child protection, including requesting or imploring upon the regulator, which is the Malawi Communications and Regulatory Authority, MACRA, to engage in public educational programs on the safe use of internet, with a focus on the scope of cyber crimes, tips on safe cyber experience, promotion of education uses of the internet, remedies and procedures when affected by cyber crime. Moving on, specific initiatives. In 2017, around October, the country hosted the 4th Parenting in Africa Network Conference, whose theme was embracing technology for the safety of children, with a view on ending online violence against children. This was largely a knowledge sharing platform in terms of some research work that had been done in some of the Pan-Africa Network chapters, namely Kenya, Tanzania, Malawi, sharing on some research work that had been conducted, but also focusing on the critical role of the family in preventing violence against children. That was followed up with another study on sexual exploitation of children in Malawi, which was also done with the technical support of the African Child Policy Forum. And the basis of this study was to appreciate the nature of the issues in terms of child sexual exploitation. And through this study, we came to realize that there are issues to do with the online child protection in terms of threats from issues like pornography, unwanted sexting, online sexual corruption of children, and live online child sexual abuse. But also through the same study, we attempted to look at what are some of the causes and the vulnerability factors which are affecting children and making them so vulnerable. And what came out was issues to do with HIV and AIDS, harmful cultural practices, social norms, and the poverty. Also, in terms of the initiatives, the country has a national child helpline, which is operational with a toll-free number 116. It's operational 24/7. And linked to that child helpline, in 2018, the country launched an Internet Watch portal, which is supported by the Internet Watch Foundation of the UK, but is hosted by an organization called YouthNet and Counseling, which is a civil society organization under the watch of the regulator and the ministries of gender and ministry responsible for information and communication technologies. Continuing with the progress highlights, also in 2019, another study was also conducted on the access and use of information and communication technologies by households and individuals. One major issue that was uncovered is the high rates of exposing children to different materials that can harm them through platforms such as Facebook, WhatsApp, and other internet platforms, particularly among girls and young children. Lastly, under the initiatives, we have just concluded the development of our first draft of the National Child Online Strategy, which has 7 priority areas with some accompanying strategies. And these are linked to issues to do with legal enforcement systems. And the major issue is capacity enhancement for law enforcement agencies, regulators, service providers, the police, and the judiciary. Area number 2 is on policy legislation and regulation. We need to assess all the relevant policies that have a bearing on child online protection in terms of gaps that they are in, and see what could be done. The same could also apply to policies, issues of standards, and the regulations as we further develop the child online protection strategy. Also, the other priority areas to do with how do we ensure that there is a safe online environment for our children. So that could be done through enhancing reporting mechanisms through the Internet Watch portal and the other tools that could be made available, a review of curricula, more especially in the education sector, and also the Malawi police services to include aspects of online child protection. The other area is to do with national and international cooperation because of the nature of cyber crimes. We really need to do that through joint commissions of cooperation. Issues of capacity building in terms of investing in evidence-based research, issues of monitoring, evaluation, and research, and the civic education, lobbying, and advocacy. What are some of the challenges that are encountered so far? One of the major challenges is that currently there is still limited data on the trends of online child sexual exploitation in Malawi. So far, we don't have a nationally representative data on the child online abuse. Also, there are some gaps in the legal frameworks that still make our children vulnerable. Again, the legal frameworks are not sufficiently backed by resource allocations in the government budgets. And the issue of poverty is still an issue which still needs to be addressed. And the other issue is the capacity of the first line responders when the issues are reported. Largely, we are looking at the law enforcement agencies in terms of their level of knowledge, particularly for newly enacted laws, such as the Electronic Transactions and Cybersecurity Act of 2016. But also, when you look at the general public, there is limited awareness and knowledge of the laws and policies that address online child sexual exploitation. Also, we see some challenges to do with the inadequate capacity to detect and investigate online pornography, coupled with what I already touched on, the inadequate understanding of the relevant laws. What have we learned, or what are we learning as we continue developing, implementing, coordinating, and monitoring policy, which is aimed at preventing online child sexual exploitation and exploitation in general? One of the critical issues is that for children, access to information is critical for their fun, for their education, and general development. So that has to be borne in mind. Secondly, issues of international coordination and collaboration are essential. For instance, when you look at what could be achieved through the international police, Interpol, there are some possibilities of getting information on the child sexual exploitation threats and the suspected cases from other Interpol national central bureaus. Also, what is coming out is stakeholder involvement is critical. And we need to engage the children and young people, parents, guardians, educators, the industry, in terms of the internet service providers and the other industry players, the research community, non-governmental organizations, law enforcement, and the social services. But also, just as was the case with my colleague from Zambia, there is need for a national focus on online child protection. So we need to elevate the issue of online child protection to a national agenda. What do we need to do as we continue promoting measures and actions that will address children's vulnerability to online abuse and exploitation? What is most critical is the multi-stakeholder consultations, ongoing consultations with government leading, but also involving industry players, schools, NGOs, the issue of research on use of ICTs by children, issues of capacity building for teachers on the good use of the internet for educational purposes, as learned through the impact of COVID-19, but also issues of awareness raising amongst children, teachers, and parents, the issue of strengthening the reporting mechanism through the hotlines and the other mechanisms, the issue of coordination and collaboration, both at the national and international level, and issues of promotion of the technical tools. For instance, the issue of filtering content on the internet for children by the ISPs, issues of monitoring and the evaluation. And last but not least, the issue of joining multilateral and the bilateral treaties that are there on the issue of online child protection. And I would like to conclude by saying that child online protection needs to be prioritized in any cybersecurity agenda for our nation, and indeed any nation. And also, child online protection is a shared responsibility for both government, the industry players, schools, parents, non-governmental organizations, and the other relevant stakeholders. So what is critical is that if we are to continue addressing child online protection issues, we need to have multi-stakeholder engagement, which is better coordinated by government and its partners. I submit. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kalanda. Thank you so much. Mr. Kalanda just shared with us the experience of Malawi in terms of addressing online violence against children, online child abuse and exploitation. It's good that you talked about this issue, because this is one of the areas that is grossly neglected in the continent. This is also the area where the continent is really lagging behind when compared with other regions of the world. So we know that internet connectivity is increasing in the continent, but still our law and policy frameworks are not really keeping up with these threats that our children are faced with in the online cyber environment. So it's a very important issue. Mr. Kalanda talked about their national child online strategy, which is unprecedented. It can be a template for other countries to learn from. He also talked about a portal for reporting online child abuse and a number of other concrete initiatives that the government has taken. He also talked about the issues that are still, the challenges still persist in Malawi in terms of addressing violence against children. He also highlighted what needs to be done. By the way, His Excellency, the President of the Republic of Malawi, honored us by giving us his inspiring words in our last Pan-African Conference on Violence Against Children last July. And that is basically a sign of political commitment of the highest order. And would like really to acknowledge the government of Malawi for its political commitment. So thank you, Mr. Kalanda. Thank you so much. I now move on to the next presentation. It will be in Portuguese, and there will be an automatic translation into English. Our next speaker is Ms. Angelica Mageia, who is the National Director for Child Department at the Ministry of Gender and Social Action at the Republic of Mozambique. So Ms. Angelica will be presenting in Portuguese. So there will be an automatic translation of Portuguese into English. Over to you, Ms. Angelica.
Muito obrigada, senhor moderador, pela concessão da palavra. Em primeiro lugar, gostaria de reconhecer aqui a presença de Sua Excelência o Ministro de Botsuana e os caros colegas diretores das áreas da criança nos países que aqui estão a participar. Em primeiro lugar, gostaria de apresentar a desculpa de Sua Excelência a Ministra Nyeleti Mungani. Ela gostaria de estar aqui pessoalmente, mas hoje no nosso país é dia do Conselho de Ministros, realizamos as sessões do Conselho de Ministros todas as terças-feiras e infelizmente a ministra não pode estar aqui conosco. Espero representá-la como deve ser. Estamos a aprender muito, por isso queremos agradecer a oportunidade de estar neste fórum. Estamos a aprender muito, olhando as questões que Botsuana trouxe através de Sua Excelência o Ministro. Ouvimos a experiência da Zâmbia e do Malawi. Eu penso que é uma oportunidade que nós temos de ouvir o que os outros países estão a fazer e, com isso, aprendermos a melhorar as nossas intervenções no nosso país. E agradecemos mais uma vez por esta oportunidade. Nós iremos partilhar aqui com este fórum a experiência sobre a nossa intervenção como país para reduzir os riscos sociais e econômicos à violência contra a criança, por meio de programas de proteção social. Obrigada. Assim como eu dizia, iremos partilhar a nossa experiência sobre a resposta aos riscos econômicos e sociais relativos à violência contra a criança. Obrigada. Podemos iniciar? Obrigada. Primeiro, gostaríamos de partilhar que 51% da população moçambicana é composto por crianças, de acordo com o nosso último inquérito populacional realizado em 2017. E a dispositivo anterior, faz favor. Acho que perdemos mas podemos continuar. Sim, dizer que a população de Moçambique é composta por 51% de crianças e o compromisso que o governo tem para a proteção da criança está claramente indicado na nossa Constituição da República. A Constituição da República traz claramente as responsabilidades do Estado, as responsabilidades da família e a responsabilidade da sociedade sobre os direitos, sobre o cuidado que deve ser direcionado para a criança, traz claramente que a criança deve ser assistida independentemente da sua cor, raça e outras questões que podem gerar discriminação. O nosso país, em termos de quadro regulatório e orientador para a implementação dos direitos da criança, ao nível global e regional, o nosso país ratificou a Convenção das Nações Unidas sobre os Direitos da Criança e os seus protocolos facultativos relativos à venda de crianças para os fins de prostituição, pornografia e o uso de crianças como crianças-soldado. Também ratificou a Carta Africana sobre os Direitos e Bem-Estar da Criança e as convenções da OIT sobre a idade mínima de admissão no emprego e sobre as piores formas de trabalho infantil. Podemos seguir? Next, please. Obrigada. Em termos de quadro regulatório a nível nacional, instrumentos domésticos, temos um quadro regulatório muito vasto, mas gostaria de destacar aqui algumas leis que orientam o nosso trabalho como setor do gênero, criança e ação social em ações de proteção à criança. Quero destacar aqui a lei sobre a promoção e proteção dos direitos da criança, que é uma lei, nós chamamos aqui de leis de base, porque é a lei que traz todas as questões de proteção da criança, a partir dos princípios, a proteção, a responsabilidade das instituições, os processos. Então, é a lei base que o Moçambique utiliza para questões de proteção e promoção dos direitos da criança. Também queremos destacar a lei de prevenção e combate ao tráfico de pessoas, em particular as mulheres e crianças, a lei sobre violência doméstica praticada contra a mulher, que nos auxilia muito nas questões da gestão da violência praticada contra a rapariga. Temos a lei de prevenção e combate às uniões prematuras. Esta lei foi recentemente aprovada pelo nosso Parlamento, que é para responder às altas taxas de uniões prematuras que o nosso país ainda tem e que mais tarde havemos de partilhar os dados sobre a incidência. Também queremos destacar aqui a revisão da Lei da Família, que desde 2019 Sim, que desde 2019 retirou a possibilidade de indivíduos menores de 18 anos pudessem casar. Portanto, a idade mínima para o casamento em Moçambique é 18 anos e foi fixada à luz da revisão da família que tivemos no ano 2019. Podemos ir para o slide a seguir. Trazemos aqui também para partilhar um pouco a situação da violência na infância no nosso país. Realizamos em 2019 o nosso primeiro inquérito nacional sobre violência contra a criança. Temos consciência e conhecimento de que este inquérito já foi realizado em alguns países da SADC, alguns países africanos, mas alguns países da nossa região também já puderam ter a oportunidade de fazer este inquérito. Este inquérito revelou-nos que 32% das meninas menores de 18 anos tiveram alguma situação de violência na sua infância e 40% dos rapazes slide, dispositivo anterior. Dispositivo anterior, faz favor. No. Back, please. Back one. Yes. Dizia assim que o mesmo inquérito indicava que 32% das meninas já sofreram qualquer tipo de violência na infância e 40% dos rapazes também tiveram algum tipo de violência na infância.
Angelica, we have lost, I think the interpreter has dropped off.
Yes.
Straton, are you able to jump? Thank you. Gone in.
Obrigada. Sim, dizíamos que o inquérito revelou-nos que... Só que estou a ouvir o retorno. Posso... Sim, dizia que 32% das meninas já sofreram qualquer tipo de violência na infância e 40% dos rapazes também já sofreram qualquer tipo de violência. E também o inquérito revelou-nos que 21% dos rapazes que estão entre os 13 aos 17 anos já viveram com alguém como se fosse casado e 1,9% dos rapazes também já viveram na mesma situação. E também o inquérito revelou-nos que 41% das meninas entre 18 e 24 anos já haviam se casado antes de completar 18 anos, idem para rapazes da mesma faixa etária que representavam 11%. A seguir, faz favor. Agora, para fazer face a esse cenário que aqui descrevemos, as questões das altas taxas de violência, as questões das altas taxas de uniões prematuras, o país tem várias iniciativas em curso. Queremos destacar aqui a expansão dos programas de proteção social, com destaque para as componentes que dão resposta direta às necessidades da criança. Queria partilhar aqui com o Fórum que nós estamos a implementar um programa que se chama Subsídio Social Básico, que tem na sua estrutura um subsídio direcionado para crianças, e este subsídio tem 3 componentes específicas para crianças. Tem um subsídio para crianças de 0 a 12 anos, que é para responder às questões de baixa nutrição, que no nosso país estão muito altas, tem 43%. Temos também o subsídio para crianças chefes de agregado familiar, para responder ao número elevado de crianças que chefeiam agregados familiares. E temos também um terceiro subsídio para crianças que vivem em famílias acolhedoras, mas que estejam em situação de vulnerabilidade. Uma outra iniciativa que o governo está a implementar é a introdução da componente de gestão de casos nos programas de proteção social, neste caso, nos programas que têm a ver com subsídio para a criança. Esta componente de subsídio da criança tem 2 ramificações, tem 2 benefícios. Primeiro, a criança recebe o dinheiro e depois recebe um pacote de cuidados. É neste pacote de cuidados que nós tentamos inovar, onde há um processo de gestão de casos, que se faz o diagnóstico sociofamiliar, para se entender os riscos sociais que estão relacionados com a situação da criança. E a partir desse levantamento do diagnóstico sociofamiliar, fazemos um plano de intervenção e nós achamos que, olhando para os dados da avaliação que fizemos recentemente, ou está em curso a sua finalização, que esta gestão de casos ajuda-nos a controlar as questões de gestão da família. Os nossos técnicos ficam mais próximos da família e nós achamos que com a confiança que as famílias desenvolvem com os nossos técnicos, ajuda a controlar vários riscos associados à violência devido aos momentos de aconselhamento e orientação que as famílias recebem dos nossos técnicos ao nível da comunidade. É uma componente um pouco onerosa, gasta-se bastante com a formação e com a disponibilidade dos técnicos ao nível das comunidades, mas tem resultados muito encorajadores. Nós aconselhamos a quem tiver interesse pesquisar um bocadinho mais sobre essa componente. É cara, é onerosa, mas tem resultados muito bons ao nível da proteção da criança no seio da sua família. Também a estratégia que estamos a utilizar é a questão da gestão anterior. Faz favor, peço para voltar. Back, please. Sim, pedia para voltar para o estatuto anterior, mas vou apresentar. Dizia que uma das questões de aposta do nosso governo é a divulgação dos direitos da criança ao nível da comunidade. Para além daquela divulgação que nós todos fazemos, via rádio, via meios de comunicação, via tecnologias, nós priorizamos os diálogos comunitários para passar mensagens sobre a violência contra a criança e sobre o papel da família na sua proteção. Também priorizamos a revitalização dos comitês. Criamos núcleos nas comunidades, nos bairros de residência das crianças, que fazem parte, membros da comunidade, fazem parte dos comitês comunitários, pessoas de referência na comunidade, que, havendo uma situação de carência ou violação dos direitos da criança, prontamente, ao nível da comunidade, vai-se ter uma intervenção, e uma intervenção local. Para nós fica mais fácil porque é um comitê que está mais próximo da comunidade. São pessoas que vivem na comunidade, são pessoas que a comunidade confia. Então, para nós é muito conveniente que esses núcleos estejam muito próximos das famílias e ajudam-nos bastante na gestão das questões de violência ao nível das nossas comunidades. Também uma resposta que o governo está a dar é a criação dos gabinetes, é a expansão dos gabinetes de atendimento à família e menores vítimas de violência. Os casos dão entrada nas esquadras, nos gabinetes que acabei de responder. Então, nós achamos que é uma forma de massificar os meios onde as famílias podem fazer a queixa, podem apresentar a queixa sobre alguma situação de violação do direito da criança no nível das comunidades. Também uma das preocupações do governo, e neste momento estamos a fazer, é a expansão dos centros integrados de atendimento às vítimas de violência. Criamos gabinetes onde a vítima vai encontrar lá todos os serviços necessários, não havendo espaço para poder se referir para outras instituições. Dá espaço do utente encontrar neste local todos os serviços que precisa. Então, estamos neste momento com 25 centros, estamos a evitar esforços para podermos expandir esses serviços e que estejam mais próximos da comunidade. Olhando para as intervenções que nós estamos a realizar, com base nas prioridades que eu me referi no slide anterior, só de janeiro a setembro deste ano, nós conseguimos assistir 917 mil agregados familiares que vivem em situação de pobreza, e deste grupo de agregados familiares temos 487 que são chefiados por crianças, e dentro deste grupo também temos 15.453 crianças que estão na faixa etária dos 0 aos 12 anos e beneficiam daquela componente de gestão de casos que me referi antes. E esses programas são implementados através do nosso Instituto Nacional de Ação Social, que nós chamamos de INAS. E achamos que essas intervenções contribuem de grande maneira para o aumento do consumo das famílias, a redução do impacto da Covid nesses últimos 3 anos e, consequentemente, melhora a atenção e as necessidades das crianças dentro do agregado familiar. Também com a intervenção da sociedade civil e dos comitês comunitários, aquela base comunitária que me referi anteriormente, foi prestado um apoio multiforme a 101 mil crianças. E destas, 55 mil são do sexo feminino, e este apoio multiforme inclui a questão do apoio psicossocial para as crianças vítimas de violência. E também referi-me também anteriormente que estamos neste momento a expandir as instituições onde as famílias e as crianças podem buscar assistência quando ocorre alguma situação de violação dos direitos da criança. Podemos seguir? Então, são essas experiências que nós queríamos trazer para este fórum, esperando ter trazido alguma novidade, os países tenham aprendido. E também gostaria de acrescentar nas intervenções que estamos neste momento também a implementar a linha Fala Criança, que é a linha 116, que é a linha de denúncia que as crianças têm disponível. Essa linha está a ser amplamente divulgada e todas as crianças têm informação sobre a existência dessa linha. Estamos também a implementar a linha SMS-BIS, é um sistema de mensagens para jovens e adolescentes terem informações sobre os seus direitos sobre a saúde sexual e reprodutiva e de lá receberem orientações. E também estamos a implementar o Parlamento Infantil, que é um fórum nacional de crianças, onde elas têm a oportunidade de dialogar com o governo, com a sociedade civil, os parceiros de cooperação, sobre todas as preocupações que eles têm sobre a sua situação e dão recomendações sobre aquilo que gostariam de ver melhorado na sua condição de crianças e o estado da implementação dos seus direitos. Portanto, sem levar mais tempo, eu vou terminar por aqui, passando essa experiência de Moçambique. Obrigada.
Thank you very much, Ms. Angelica. Thank you so much for that inspiring presentation. I'm not going to summarize because Ms. Angelica talked about a number of issues. For instance, she talked about the fact that Mozambique has ratified most of the most important child rights instruments in Africa. It has put in place a number of law and policy frameworks. It has taken concrete steps in terms of providing preventative and response services, such as, for instance, child support grants, case management. They have also triggered a very important community conversation. One of the most important takeaways of this presentation might be that Mozambique has a very strong community-based programming of child protection. So there is community-based committees or chiefdom committees, as some call them in some countries. So there are a number of lessons that we can draw from Mozambique. So thank you very much, Ms. Angelica, for that inspiring presentation. We're slightly behind schedule. I don't know if we are going, I will entertain a couple of questions before I go to the next session. Perhaps I might entertain 2 or 3 questions. You can put your questions in the Q&A chat box. And it's good also if you direct your questions to the presenters. You can also really ask generic questions. And let me entertain around 3 or 4 questions, and then I'll move on to the next session. So now it's open for discussion. You can raise your questions now. You can write your questions in the Q&A chat box, or you can raise your hands and you can ask your questions. Saba, can you take down your slide?
Yes, I will just.
I can't see any hands raised, if I'm not mistaken. So perhaps if you can also keep your question for later discussion. And now I think there's good to proceed to the next session. The next session, basically, like I said earlier, will be the civil society perspective. In combating violence against children, there is a very important role that civil society organizations play. It is important that governments create a collaborative framework with civil society organizations to really bring about significant change in combating violence against children. So it is important that civil society also gets involved. Now we have a session where a couple of civil society organizations will share their experiences in terms of what's being done really by civil society organizations in both preventing and responding to violence against children in the Southern African region. We have in this panel, we have Ms. Saba Alishan, who is a senior technical officer of the African Partnership to End Violence Against Children. We also have Mr. Rata Getachew, who is a program manager for the Child Development and Protection Program at the African Child Policy Forum. We also have Mr. Malama Mwila, who is a regional advocacy and campaign manager for Save the Children East and Southern Africa Regional Office. I now invite Ms. Saba to take us through her presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Shumalis. Honorable Mabusi Pule, Assistant Minister from the Government of Botswana. Honorable Aver Gavar, Special Rapporteur on Violence Against Children from the African Committee of Experts on the Rights and Welfare of the Child. Distinguished directors from the Government of Malawi, Mozambique, and Zambia. And Ms. Emelanda Bambo, our youngest activist, ladies and gentlemen. When strong commitment and sustained action come together, violence in children's lives stops being perceived as inevitable, and indeed it can be eliminated. The protection of children from violence, abuse, and exploitation is not just about human rights, but about impact on development. Because our main objective in this regional dialogue is to leverage on the growing commitment of Southern African countries to end violence against children. In this session, we will get an overview of the state of efforts of the 16 member states of SADC in delivering on this goal. This presentation has two parts. The first part is where I will share with you the progress in terms of member states' efforts in reinforcing the normative and policy frameworks, their implementation capacity, and delivery of programs and services. And finally, I will highlight some of the key persisting challenges to ending violence against children in the region. The second part of this presentation, which is going to be presented by my colleague Rata Getachew, will focus on the lesson learned and solutions. Now, on the normative foundations or normative standards, the African Charter on the Rights and Welfare of the Child in Article 16 places the primary responsibility on states to protect children from violence. Southern African governments have unquestionably made significant efforts to strengthen their legal and policy framework to protect children from violence, abuse, and exploitation. Now, let's look into some of these progresses. First, in terms of ratification of international regional child rights instruments that are really critical in the protection of children from violence. The first one is the African Charter on the Rights and Welfare of the Child. This is universally ratified by all 16 member states. The second is the African Charter on Human and People's Rights. Once again, this is ratified by all 16 member states. The protocol to the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, the rights of women, this is ratified by 14 member states with the exception of Botswana and Madagascar. The AU Convention on Cybersecurity and Personal Data and Protection This is ratified by 4 member states, Angola, Mauritius, Mozambique, and Namibia. The other is the Convention on the Elimination of all forms of violence, all forms of discrimination against women. This is ratified by almost all member states, 16 member states. The ILO Convention on the 182, the worst forms of child labor, ratified by all 16 member states. The ILO Convention on minimum age of employment, once again ratified by all 16 member states. The Hague Convention, another important instrument on inter-country adoption, is only ratified by 8 member states. Now, in terms of the national legal framework, there has been considerable progress in this area as well. Now, if we look into the member states' progress in this area, according to the Committee of Experts on the Rights and Welfare of the Child, it is a best practice for state parties to the African Charter on the Rights of Welfare of the Child to enshrine a detailed area of rights of children in their constitution. In this regard, 15 member states, with the exception of Botswana, refer to children in their constitution. Again, with the exception of Comoros, all member states of SADC recognize freedom from torture and cruel, inhuman, and degrading treatment or punishment as a fundamental rights in their constitutions. Once again, all 16 member states of SADC have consolidated children's statutes providing a wide range of protection for children. All 16 member states, once again, have legal framework for civil registration and vital statistics. Moving on in terms of progress in this area, there has been significant progress on the legal protection of children from sexual violence. All member states of SADC have incorporated provisions criminalizing different forms of sexual violence involving children, including sexual exploitation and child pornography, into their national laws. And 12 member states of SADC have set the minimum age of marriage at 18 years or above, with the exception of DRC, Tanzania, Seychelles, and Zambia. The SADC Parliamentary Forum also adopted its model law on eradicating child marriage, protecting children already in marriage, in support of the AU campaign to end child marriage. This model law requires SADC member states to harmonize their national laws to prevent child marriage. Many countries have passed child-specific or general anti-trafficking laws, or have included relevant provisions in their criminal or penal code or other statutes or acts. That means all member states have also have laws on child trafficking. 12 member states of SADC have domestic laws in line with the ILO Convention number 138, and all have set a minimum employment age higher than 14 years, with the exception of Angola, Botswana, and Tanzania. Now, in terms of implementation capacity, this is where we see a lot of challenges, but there are progresses in this aspect as well. Most countries, all countries have introduced different measures and strategies to address violence against children, including strengthening their overall national protection system. They have introduced community mobilization programs to challenge social norms. They have introduced family economic strengthening programs. These are really very critical in terms of addressing the underlying risk factors that really heighten children's vulnerability to violence. Many countries have introduced parenting programs. This is once again very critical to address the family dynamics, the relationship between family parents. Many countries in the region have also introduced multifaceted intervention to address school-based violence. This is also very critical. Another interesting aspect which many countries in the region have progressed to do is the care reform. They have promoted family-based care alternatives, such as promotion of kinship care, foster care, and they have supported independent living. Another important area is the investment that countries have been doing to build the agency of children. Many countries in the region have also worked towards creating a child-friendly referral and complaint mechanisms, often led by a network of frontline service providers. Moving on with still with the implementation capacity. A growing number of countries in the region have begun to invest in violence prevention knowledge and skills training of their social workforce. This is a very important development. Of the 12 SADC member states that were included in the WHO 2020 Global Status Report on preventing violence against children, 11 member states have at least one comprehensive plan of action to address violence against children. And 6 countries in the region, these are Botswana, Namibia, South Africa, Tanzania, Zambia, and Zimbabwe, have become pathfinders. The Pathfinding Initiative is a global initiative for ending violence against children, where governments of these countries have acknowledged that the scale of violence and abuse of children needs to be acted upon decisively and made the political commitment to end it by 2030. These 6 countries have prepared or are preparing a multi-sectoral national plan of action to prevent and eliminate violence against children, informed by the 7 evidence-based violence prevention strategies known as the INSPIRE package. Finally, in the area of implementation capacity, improvement in the implementation capacity, ladies and gentlemen, effective policies require effective coordination and collaboration among multiple sectors and stakeholders. In this regard, member states are at a different level in establishing high-level coordinating body with clear roles and responsibilities assigned to relevant departments and institutions to avoid overlap and to promote synergies among sectors. In terms of data and evidence that can effectively inform policy and practice, 9 countries in the region, Eswatini, Botswana, Lesotho, Malawi, Namibia, Tanzania, South Africa, Zimbabwe, and Zambia, have conducted government-led national survey on violence against children. This is really a critical development in the region. Now, looking into some of the key persisting challenges in addressing violence against children in the region, although much has been achieved across the continent, a closer investigation to this progress, however, show that Africa as a continent and Southern Africa as a region have to simply do more for children. Some of the persisting challenges in Africa, indeed in the region, are, to start with, is that there is still insufficient investment in violence prevention, despite the clear benefit for human and economic development and the high social cost of inaction. National strategies to address violence against children remain largely fragmented and non-existent. As you have heard from previous presenters, legislation remain uncoordinated, poorly enforced, with notable gap in children's legal protection and between law and practice in many countries. Plan of actions often are not costed, remain uncoordinated with weak communication and articulation across government, departments, and between central and local authorities, and more importantly, with a national development agenda. I want to commend here, Ms. Bridget, the progress in the government of Zambia to making sure that the national plan of action also is aligned with the national development. This is a critical development which many countries need to follow. The other important, still a major gap in the region is the insufficient attention given to the situation of particularly vulnerable children who remain hidden and overlooked from policy, legal framework, but also other measures. There is inadequate attention to the cumulative impact of violence across children's lives and insufficient investment in early childhood care and development for positive parenting programs. There is a growing but enough investment, not enough investment being made to regularly generate comprehensive data to inform legislation, policy, and wide social mobilization to effectively combat violence against children. Of course, our challenge across the continent with regards to the deep-rooted social norms, values, and practices that condone violence against children remains really our biggest challenge. As a result, ladies and gentlemen, Africa as a continent and Southern Africa as a region are where many children live lives of joy and peace, while others are exposed to violence in all its forms. The numbers are staggering, as we have seen from the infographic earlier. The use of violence to discipline children is widespread in Africa in general and in Southern Africa in particular. Recent evidence show that more than 8 out of 10 children aged between 1 to 14 experience violent discipline every month in this region. More than 4 in 10 children aged to 13 to 15 reported being bullied at least once in the past 2 months at school in this region once again. Online child sexual exploitation is a growing problem in the region as well. As you all know, the COVID-19 has brought an additional challenge in the effort to prevent or respond to violence against children. The pandemic really created a lot of challenges for many of our countries. It has disrupted access to social and child protection services, thus exasperating the vulnerability of children to violence. So this remains a critical problem, and it has affected many countries. And now, ladies and gentlemen, some children experience in the region, some children experience violence in a more sustained and damaging way than others because of the circumstances in which they find themselves. For example, conflict, displacement, or poverty, or their circumstances, for example, because of their age, gender, or disability. According to a CPF recent research, sexual violence inflicted on children with disability is high in many countries. Children with albinism are sometimes subjected to ritualized form of violence. In Southern Africa, where myths abound on albinism, children with albinism have been killed or for their body parts. 1/3 of girls aged to 15-19 experience a forms of physical violence. So the scale is really unacceptably high. Now, evidence from the African Child Policy Forum 2020 Africa Report on Child Wellbeing that assesses and ranks the friendliness of 52 African governments towards girls in terms of their national legal policy framework for protecting girls from violence, but also looking into the concrete outcomes achieved for girls through enforcing these laws and policies, shows that out of the 7 countries in Africa who are in most girl-friendly category, 4 countries, Mauritius, Namibia, South Africa, and Seychelles, are members of the SADC. Among the 8 countries in the girl-friendly category, Lesotho is the only country from this region. Out of the 14 countries that are in the fairly girl-friendly category from the region, Zambia, Eswatini, Angola, Mozambique, Malawi are included. In the less girl-friendly category, out of the 16 countries in Africa, 4 countries are from the region. These are Botswana, Zambia, Madagascar, and Tanzania. Finally, from the 7 least girl-friendly countries in Africa, 2 countries, DRC and Comoros, are included in the list. Ladies and gentlemen, overall, this is the picture we have for the region in terms of progress in addressing violence against children. We have included all the resources for your reference in this presentation. Because of the limitation of timing, I will conclude my presentation here. I thank you very much for your kind attention. My colleague Rata will now take us to the important solution that we have found out from the researches we have undertaken recently. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Saba. Thank you so much. Because Saba has already covered most of the issues, we'll directly go to Rata. And Rata, I'll give you only 5 minutes to wrap up your presentation because Saba has already covered most of the issues that you were planning to present. Over to you, Rata.
Thank you, Dr. Shimelis. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, all protocols observed. In our recent VAC ACPF joint report, we have identified a number of promising homegrown solutions that have successfully addressed the complex interplay of factors between the child in his or her social context, such as the family, school, and so on, in influencing the child's exposure to violence. I would like to share some of the key elements, lessons that were identified as key factors of success. One of these elements is political will at the highest level. In countries where the government has demonstrated ownership and political will to address violence, there has been significant positive impact on the well-being of children in families and communities. Political will expressed by strong legal and policy frameworks and systems, along with adequate allocation of funds from national budgets, are important for creating a culture of prevention of violence against children. The second key element we've learned from these reports, from this report, is community ownership and buy-in. Community networks have demonstrated the ability and capacity to mobilize rapidly on their own to address protection concerns. And community-based mechanisms have also, facilitated access to extremely marginalized and hard-to-reach vulnerable groups, particularly in fragile contexts, promoting acceptance for ostracized members, such as child combatants and children with disabilities. The third factor is sensitivity to intersectionality of approaches. We've learned that interventions that took holistic, intersectional approaches were very effective at family level. For example, activities around reinforcing healthy relationships, engaging men and boys, and economic strengthening programs at the household level brought about good results by reducing risk factors and promoting protective factors to violence against children. The fourth key factor we have identified is resilience and leadership. At an individual level especially, a strong resolve to see ideas in action and for them to bear fruit was found to be very critical. Initiatives that tackled negative social norms, particularly such as FGM, early and forced marriage, for example, were effective because they built and rebuilt the confidence and agency of young girls who were either at risk or already abused and exploited. The other key element is the active role of religious and faith-based actors. These actors, as you know, are instrumental in developing, supporting, homegrown solutions in Africa. They have the advantage of already being rooted in our communities with a history of addressing moral and ethical issues and with strong influence on the community. And last but not least is the use of existing local and community structures such as local village savings and lending associations that are well rooted in the communities and are community-led were found to be very key to economic strengthening at individual and family levels, and hence, of course, violence prevention. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, apart from these solutions, our reports have also identified different points as key areas for attention, not just for governments, but also for the African Union and regional economic communities. I will only highlight those recommendations for the African Union and the regional economic communities because previous speakers have already highlighted actions need to be taken by the national governments. Our reports recommended that the African Union must continue to demonstrate political leadership on children's rights, specifically the African Charter on the Rights and Welfare of the Child, as well as its monitoring institution, which is the African Committee of Experts, as well as the Special Rapporteur on VAC should be supported and facilitated to advance efforts to end violence against children. And beyond the African Union, regional economic communities also must act really in solidarity on violence against children issues. A high-level multilateral political dialogue on VAC, for example, convened by these RECs would catalyze the adoption of an African regional action plan to end VAC, which has protection, prevention, and accountability components, as well as clear practical indicators for success and evaluation of compliance and accountability. So in the interest of time, I will leave the actions that have to be taken by the national governments, which were already highlighted by previous speakers. I thank you, Dr. Schmelz. I submit.
Thank you very much, Retta. That was so succinct and very informative. Thank you so much. Retta has outlined some of the solutions we need to really follow in the area of preventing and responding to violence against children. Thank you, Retta. Thank you so much. I'm not going to summarize what the speaker said. We are a little bit behind schedule, and I know that most of you do have other engagements outside of these virtual meetings. So if you don't mind, I would proceed with the closing session. And we have one presentation left from Save the Children. I'm really sorry. First, I will invite Mr. Malama Mwila, with the Regional Advocacy and Campaign Manager, Eastern Southern Africa Regional Office of the Children International. Mr. Malama, if you don't mind, I will only give you 6 minutes. And if you can wrap up your presentation with the 6 minutes, so that our speakers in the closing session can also have time to say what they're going to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the introduction. And I think a lot of information has been shared already from the different actors. So first of all, of course, I would want to just ride on the existing protocols that have already been used and just try and rush through in the 5 minutes or so that I have. I think part of the presentation that I have really, also let me start my video so that, So part of the presentation that I have, I was about to say, has been really shared by the child participant that we had. And in the sense that, we're looking at a situation where violence against children is quite high within Eastern Southern Africa and obviously globally as well. But I think one key question that we want to ask ourselves all the time, that in some parts of the world, smacking and hitting children, for example, is a normal thing. And of course, it's seen as a good way of parenting. And as an organization, Save the Children doesn't agree with that approach of parenting children with violence or through violence. And therefore, we ask ourselves, is it worthy for children to be growing up in fear of saying or doing something wrong because, you know, they may experience violence from their parents and caregivers? And of course, that is not something that children should have to live with. We work with children, families, and communities to transform the way adults treat children, view and listen to children, especially girls, and improve relationships while improving communication within homes. So this is just something that is basic, but it's fundamentally very important. So in terms of the way that we do this, we have an approach that we refer to as parenting without violence approach. And this is one of our fundamental tools that we use to address the problem of violence against children in communities that we work in within Eastern Southern Africa and around the world. Our key approaches under the parenting without violence approach is that we work with governments to ensure that the legal basis is firm for protecting children from all forms of violence. So we want to ensure that governments in countries where we work are providing support services for children. We provide mothers and caregivers with knowledge, skills, and confidence to raise their children without violence and create respectful and nurturing homes. In particular, we are focusing on helping girls and boys feel valued, respected, and safe within their families and communities through empowering communities. And lastly, I would say, as one of our key components of our presentation, our approach is we work with communities to change attitudes and behaviors about violence against children. So social and cultural norms are a fundamental reason as to why there is unacceptably high levels of violence within our region. And we work with households and with families to ensure that we address that fundamental problem. So through some of our positive parenting programs, in terms of just giving some specific examples from our region, we have seen positive changes in communities or in areas where we are operating. So for example, in some of the areas where we have been operating in and implementing the parenting without violence approach, in Rwanda, physical and humiliating punishment by teachers was reduced by 58%. So we were working with teachers and children and parents to address some of these underlying causes and drivers of violence against children through the parenting without violence approach. In Uganda, for example, violence against children from a father reduced by 26%. So we know, and that from the information that we have based on our evidence-based approaches, that this approach does work. And our vision is that by the year 2030, we want to see a world where violence against children is no longer tolerated. And to conclude, I just want to give this example of a case of a child and their mother in Zambia on the Copperbelt province. And this is what they had to say. Through these engagements where they engaged between the mother and the son, the mother said, I learned how to talk to my children. In the past, my default reaction was beating them when they did something wrong, but I have changed now. And her son, Patson, says, I'm happy to be in a home where violence is not a solution. Instead of resorting to violence, we just talk about things and resolve differences peacefully. So a key fundamental approach of this work we're doing is really that we work with both the parents and the children to have joint and separate sessions to talk about violence in the home and to talk about violence in the community and how it needs to be addressed by just effective communication being promoted. So that was me trying to rush through my presentation. I hope I'm within the 5 minutes, but hopefully we can have more conversations if time allows in the discussions. And I'll share my contact details for those who are interested in learning more about what Save the Children is doing in the different countries within our region and global, so that we can hopefully expand and reach more children using this approach with your partnership as key and concerned stakeholders. Thank you very much, Chair. I hand over back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Malama, and I really apologize for being so brutal. And I know you're a very good, eloquent speaker, and but within the next those 5 minutes, I learned a lot. I know that Save the Children has a very strong child protection programming, and if we had the time, really would have learned a lot from Mr. Malama. But still, you can access what Save the Children is doing in their website. So thank you, Mr. Malama, again. Thank you so much. Because we are slightly running behind schedule, I think I would advise that we directly move to the closing session. We in the closing session, we've got Mr. Patrick Onyango Mangan, with the Chief Executive Officer of REPSI. We also have the honor of Honorable Aver Gavar, with the Special Rapporteur on Violence Against Children from the African Committee of Experts on the Rights and Welfare of the Child. Both of these speakers will give us their reflections on the way forward. We've heard a lot about the state of violence against children in the continent, the progress made in the different countries, and also in the continent itself broadly, and also some of the persistent challenges that we are faced with. So in this closing session, these speakers, esteemed speakers, will give us their reflections in terms of what needs to be done as we move forward, especially from a Southern African perspective. Mr. Patrick Onyango, the floor is yours, sir.
Mindawi, the Principal Secretary, Deputy Prime Minister's Office from the Kingdom of Eswatini, Honorable Ministers from Botswana, Mozambique, South Africa, and Zimbabwe, distinguished directors from the governments of Angola, Malawi, and Zambia, Emilinda Mbambo, our youngest activist from the Republic of Namibia. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Patrick Onyango Mangen, and I work with REPSI as the Chief Executive Officer. I'm here to read the closing statement for this regional Southern Africa dialogue towards an Africa free from violence against children. The Regional Psychosocial Support Initiative is honored to co-convene this important regional dialogue with our partners, the Africa Partnership to End Violence Against Children and the Africa Child Policy Forum. For the past 19 years, REPSI has been promoting psychosocial and mental well-being of children as important strategies for preventing and responding to violence against children in East and Southern Africa. We have learned that providing quality and timely psychosocial care and support to children who are at risk of experiencing or survivors of abuse, neglect, exploitation, or violence have considerable contribution to effectively prevent short and long-term psychological problems. This is a holistic approach that puts the child at the center of its wider development context, such as education and healthcare. Increasingly, countries in the region are taking very encouraging steps to improve technical, structural, and financial capacity to be able to provide comprehensive care and support to children and their families who are in need of such assistance as part of their national child protection system response. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we are honored to co-convene this dialogue that takes stock of the region's milestones and challenges, but also most importantly, highlights the areas for action towards eliminating violence against children. As we have heard from honorable ministers and directors today, many of our governments are increasingly demonstrating political commitment for the cause by strengthening their national policy frameworks and other programmatic measures. But this political leadership must be clearly reflected in the member states' national development agenda, a well-resourced and policy document of all nations. However, evidence from APIVAC and the ACPF and other partners shows that well-intentioned national policy frameworks for addressing violence against children often lacks the necessary financial resources. Equally, these policy frameworks fall short from adopting a holistic approach across a child's life cycle, hindering multi-sectoral action and coordination. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, as a civil society organization working at a regional level, REPSI individually and with our partners such as ACPF and APIVAC has been working to ensure that violence against children is an integral part of member states' national actions and conversations. Today in this regional dialogue, we reiterate our firm commitment to our principles and pledge to continue to work with you, our government partners, on the following. First and foremost, advocate for increased and sustained political will for preventing and responding to violence against children. With respect to increased and sustained political will, we are advocating for robust and well-resourced legal and policy frameworks and systems that provide adequate legal protection from violence to every girl and boy in their home, in their communities, in their schools, and in their networks. Second, we have also learned from experience that efforts to address violence against children can benefit more if we learn from each other. Therefore, we will promote cross-country learning, evidence-based strategies and approaches on providing holistic psychosocial care and support, as well as other violence prevention strategies such as the INSPIRE framework to address the underlying political, social, economic, and cultural factors that are known to heighten children's vulnerability and risks to violence. Third, we will continue to strengthen capacities in country psychosocial and mental health programs and services to children who are at risk of violence or are survivors of violence as an important measure for promoting child well-being, dignity, and happiness. Finally, the most important actors in ending violence against children are the children themselves. We need to involve the children meaningfully, ensure that child participation cuts across everything that we do, and to bring child leadership at the forefront of planning and taking action on the issues that are causing violence. The active and meaningful involvement of children in identifying the challenges and solutions to violence against children is critical for efforts to end violence against children and ensure that all these efforts succeed. I therefore close by reiterating our commitment as REPSI to work with all of you here present and those who have not been able to attend to promote platforms that ensure that children's views and perspectives inform action, and that our strategy of working with government on policies and actions that promote what we have discussed today are upheld. Thank you very much for your attention, and thank you for participating in this dialogue today.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, sir. Mr. Patrick has given us his remarks in terms of what needs to be done. As a co-organizer of this dialogue forum, he has really shown us the way forward in terms of what needs to be done to create an Africa or a region as Southern Africa and as Africa as a continent, to create a continent that's free from violence against children. So thank you so much, sir. Thank you very much for those words. I have now the honor to invite a very dedicated child rights activist in Honorable Aver Gavar, who is a special rapporteur on violence against children from the African Committee of Experts on the Rights of the Child. She is on the forefront of the efforts in tackling violence against children in the continent. She has become really a champion of the cause of children in the continent. I have the honor to invite Honorable Aver Gavar to give us her closing remarks. Over to you, Madam.
Okay, thank you very much. His Excellency, Mr. Makshoni Ndawe, Principal Secretary, Deputy Prime Minister's Office from the Kingdom of Eswatini, honorable ministers from Botswana, Mozambique, South Africa, and Zimbabwe, distinguished directors from the governments of Angola, Malawi, and Zambia, and Melinda Mbabu, our youngest speaker from the Republic of Namibia. Ladies and gentlemen, I am, as earlier introduced, Madam Ave Gava. I'm the Special Rapporteur on Violence Against Children in the African Committee of Experts on the Rights and Welfare of the Child. It is an absolute pleasure to be with you today at this regional dialogue, to deliberate on our collective efforts towards creating an Africa free from violence against children. Children's protection from violence is at the core of the African Charter on the Rights and Welfare of the Child and continental and global development agendas, namely Agenda 2040, Fostering an African Fit for Children, Agenda 2063, the Africa we want, and Agenda 2030, the Sustainable Development Goals. And member states have an obligation to fulfill this commitment. Failing to deliver on this commitment will seriously impede economic and social development across all the aspirations of Agenda 24, the aspirations of Agenda 2063 and the SDGs. Last year, at the occasion of the completion of the first 5-year implementation phase of Agenda 24, the African Committee of Experts on the Rights and Welfare of the Child issued a report on the status of its implementation. The study assessed the progress achieved by states in implementing the 10 aspirations set forth in the agenda. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, as you may all know, Agenda 24 requires states to prohibit all forms of physical abuse, neglect and negligent treatment, sexual violence and exploitation, harmful practices, including child labor, female genital mutilation, and child marriage. Similar to the findings of the recently launched reports produced jointly by the African Partnership to End Violence Against Children and ACPF, the committee's assessment of the situation of children in Southern Africa showed that although there is increased political commitments from many of the countries in the region, and that the region has made significant inroads from law reform efforts and the development of comprehensive policy to the creation of multi-sectoral collaboration structures and platforms, from increasing budgetary allocations to implementing innovative service models. However, significant gaps still exist in ensuring that every child is protected against violence, exploitation, and abuse. Ladies and gentlemen, this regional dialogue forum is an opportunity to reignite our resolve to create an Africa fit for children. Through the work of my mandate as Special Rapporteur on Violence Against Children of the committee, I am strongly committed to collaborating with all of you to implement Agenda 2040 and reach the aspiration on ending violence against children. A key component of this support is to collaborate with organizations such as APVAC, ACPF, and REPSI to promote evidence and share good practices, innovative approaches, and effective policies and programs. In July this year, APVAC and ACPF launched 3 reports: Violence Against Children in Africa, a report on progress and challenges, National Capacity to Address Violence Against Children, Assessment in 10 African countries, and Here to Stay, Homegrown Solutions to Violence Against Children, in order to inform members or member states on the state of violence against children, but more importantly, to share a range of innovative initiatives and key priorities to bring about a quick end to the problem of violence against children in Africa. Excellencies, as I close this conference, allow me to present to you what I envisage to be our common position for action to reinvigorate our collective action to bring about a quick end to violence against children in the region. One, despite the considerable advances in the area of law reform in the region, many children, especially those under vulnerable circumstances, are still not provided with adequate legal protection from violence. Member states should prohibit all forms of violence against children in all settings without exception. Two, countries in the Southern African region have demonstrated better results in putting in place policy frameworks to address violence prevention. However, in some instances, these policy frameworks are not concretized through multi-sectoral strategies. Member states need to invest in an integrated multi-sectoral plan of action, which is aligned with the National Development Agenda for effective prevention and response to violence against children. Three, capitalizing on current commendable efforts to build children's agencies, member states need to strive to take transformative measures in building the agency of children and making them central to the movement of ending violence against children. Lastly, in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic, strengthening gender-responsive and inclusive systems for providing integrated services for children that are directly or indirectly affected by the pandemic becomes an important priority. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the continent we love so much can only thrive if we care and protect our children. There are very few things so urgent and so grave as violence perpetrated against children, which denies them of their dignity as children and their future as adults. Hence the call for action to free our children on the continent from violence against children. I thank you all. Salam.
Thank you very much. And those excellent words of the Honorable Abir Gabar brings us to the end of this dialogue forum. I would like to say that the three reports that the Honorable Special Rapporteur mentioned are available on ACPF website. The report that we launched last July, one of which relates to the capacity of governments to respond to violence against children, another report on homegrown initiatives, the other one on the state of progress in addressing violence against children in the continent. Those three major continental reports are available on our website. I would also like to say that all these the presentations will be shared in due course. Saba will be sharing the presentations to all of you. So I would like to say thank you to all of you for your commitment, dedication, for your patience. We have run out of time, but you have been with us for the last more than a couple of hours. So thank you very much. Stay safe. Goodbye.